In 1942, long before Libya was known for oil riches or political drama, a baby boy named Muammar was born in a Bedouin tent near the coastal city of Sirte. His parents, Abu Meniar and Aisha, were poor nomadic herders, living a life that had changed very little for centuries. This wasn't a life of silver spoons, it was a life of sand, stars, and survival. Growing up in the vast, unforgiving desert gave young Gaddafi a perspective that was deeply rooted in the traditions of his tribe and the harsh realities of his environment. He saw firsthand a Libya under foreign influence, a nation rich in history but poor in opportunity for its own people, which planted the seeds of a revolutionary fire in him from a very young age. When it came time for school, Gaddafi had to leave his family's nomadic lifestyle behind. He moved to the city of Seba for his secondary education, and this is where the world really opened up to him. It was the 1950s, a time when a powerful new idea was sweeping across the Arab world: pan-Arab nationalism. The voice leading this charge was Egypt's charismatic president, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gaddafi and his friends would huddle around radios, listening to Nasser's speeches calling for Arab unity, independence from Western colonial powers, and social justice. These weren't just political ideas. For a young, ambitious Libyan, they were a blueprint for a new future, a promise that Arabs could reclaim their destiny. Naturally, for a young man dreaming of changing his country, the military seemed like the most direct path to power. Gaddafi enrolled in the Royal Military Academy in Benghazi, where he proved to be a sharp and dedicated student. He wasn't just there to learn how to march and shoot, he was there to network. He started building a secret group of like-minded young officers, all of them inspired by Nasser and disgusted by the corruption and weakness of Libya's monarchy under King Idris I. After graduating in 1965, he even got a little extra training in the United Kingdom, which probably gave him a front-row seat to the very Western world he was planning to challenge. After returning to Libya, Captain Gaddafi and his Free Officers movement didn't waste any time. They saw a kingdom that was letting foreign companies pump Libya's oil wealth out of the ground while its people remained poor. On September 1, 1969, while King Idris was away in Turkey for medical treatment, the moment came. At the age of just 27, Gaddafi led a swift and completely bloodless coup, taking over the country without a single shot fired in anger. In a broadcast to the nation, he declared the monarchy abolished and proclaimed the new Libyan Arab Republic. The young man from the desert tent was now the leader of the revolution. Once in power, Gaddafi moved with incredible speed to reshape Libya according to his vision. One of his first and most impactful moves was to take control of the nation's most precious resource: oil. He nationalized the oil industry, effectively telling the powerful Western oil companies that the days of them calling the shots were over. Suddenly, Libya's immense oil revenues were flowing into the state's treasury, not just foreign bank accounts. This single act gave him the financial firepower to fund his ambitious social and political experiments. He wasn't just a new leader, he was a new landlord, and the rent was finally being paid to the Libyan people. With this newfound wealth, Gaddafi introduced sweeping social welfare programs that transformed Libyan society. He believed that housing, healthcare, and education were fundamental human rights, not privileges for the wealthy, and he put his country's money where his mouth was. He launched programs that provided free, high-quality healthcare for every citizen. Education from elementary school all the way through university was also made completely free. He even offered grants for students to study abroad. For a generation of Libyans who had known only poverty, these changes were nothing short of miraculous, lifting the country's standard of living to one of the highest in all of Africa. Gaddafi's vision went beyond just social welfare. He wanted to physically transform the landscape of Libya itself. His most monumental project was the Great Man-Made River. This was an engineering marvel, a massive network of underground pipes designed to pump fresh water from aquifers deep beneath the Sahara Desert to the arid coastal cities where most Libyans lived. He called it the eighth wonder of the world, and in many ways it was. The project provided water for drinking and for agriculture, aiming to make Libya self-sufficient in food production. It was a symbol of his desire to conquer the impossible and build a modern, prosperous nation. Politically, Gaddafi introduced his own unique ideology, which he laid out in his famous Green Book. He rejected both Western-style capitalism and Soviet-style communism, proposing a third international theory, He renamed the country the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, which translates to State of the Masses. The idea was a form of direct democracy where power was supposed to be held by the people through a series of people's committees. While in practice the system was controlled by him, the theory was radical, a nation run not by a government but directly by its citizens. It was a bold, if controversial, attempt to create a new kind of state. Gaddafi's ambitions were never limited to Libya's borders. He saw himself as a leader for the entire African continent and the broader Arab world. His dream was a United States of Africa, a powerful, unified continent that could stand on its own 2 feet, free from Western economic and political domination. He was a driving force behind the transformation of the Organization of African Unity into the more ambitious African Union. He proposed a single African currency backed by gold, the African dinar, which would have challenged the dominance of the US dollar and the euro in continental trade. This made him a hero to many Pan-Africanists, but a serious headache for Western financial institutions. He was a fierce and relentless critic of what he saw as Western hypocrisy. He would stand before the United Nations and tear up the UN Charter, accusing the major powers of using it to bully smaller nations. He openly condemned Arab leaders, who he felt were too cozy with the United States and Europe, accusing them of betraying their own people for personal gain. His support for the Palestinian cause was unwavering and vocal, and he often funded various revolutionary movements around the world, earning him the label of a sponsor of terrorism from Washington. He saw himself as a freedom fighter, standing up for the oppressed against imperialist powers. Gaddafi's worldview was shaped by a deep sense of solidarity with other leaders who defied the West. When his fellow Arab leader Saddam Hussein of Iraq was captured and executed after the 2003 US-led invasion, Gaddafi expressed profound regret and anger. He saw Saddam's downfall not as a triumph of justice, but as a grim warning of what happens to any Arab or African leader who dares to maintain an independent policy and control their own natural resources. This event only hardened his resolve to forge an independent path for Libya and Africa, making him even more determined to resist Western pressure. Under his rule, Libyans experienced a level of social progress that was undeniable. The state provided interest-free loans, and if a Libyan couldn't find a job after graduating, the state paid them the average salary of their profession until they did. New mothers received a payment of $5,000, a portion of every oil sale was directly deposited into the bank accounts of every citizen. Women enjoyed rights and opportunities far beyond what was available in many neighboring Arab nations. These tangible benefits created a deep well of loyalty among many Libyans, who saw Gaddafi not as a dictator, but as a benevolent father figure who had lifted them out of poverty. By 2011, Gaddafi had been in power for over 4 decades. When the Arab Spring protests erupted across the region, they soon spread to Libya. But what started as protests in cities like Benghazi quickly escalated. The Western powers, who had long viewed Gaddafi with suspicion, saw an opportunity. They weren't just concerned about human rights, they were threatened by Gaddafi's independent policies. His push for an African currency, his control over Libya's massive oil reserves, and his massive infrastructure projects like the Great Man-Made River represented a direct challenge to their economic and strategic interests in Africa. Gaddafi's vision of a self-sufficient Africa was simply indigestible for them. With the United Nations passing a resolution to protect civilians, NATO, led by the United States, France, and the United Kingdom, launched a massive bombing campaign. They systematically destroyed Libya's military capabilities, effectively acting as the air force for the anti-Gaddafi rebels on the ground. The intervention tipped the scales decisively, turning a civil conflict into a regime change war. For months, Gaddafi evaded capture, releasing defiant audio messages and vowing to fight to the end. But the asymmetric war took its toll. On October 20, 2011, he was found hiding in a drainage pipe in his hometown of Sirte, where he was brutally killed by rebel fighters. The immediate aftermath of Gaddafi's death was not the dawn of democracy and freedom that Western leaders had promised. Instead, a power vacuum opened up, and Libya descended into chaos. The country fractured along tribal and regional lines. Rival militias, armed to the teeth with weapons from the state's looted arsenals, carved the nation into personal fiefdoms. For over a decade since, Libya has been torn apart by civil war, with competing governments in the east and west, and foreign powers backing different sides. The stability and prosperity that Libyans had known, even under an authoritarian ruler, vanished, replaced by violence, instability, and a collapsed economy. Today, more than a decade after his tragic end, Muammar Gaddafi's legacy is complex and deeply contested. In the West, he is remembered as a brutal dictator and a terrorist, but in Libya and across Africa, the memory is different. Many Libyans living amidst the ruins of their country look back with nostalgia to the era of security and welfare he provided. His ideas of Pan-African unity, economic independence, and resource sovereignty continue to inspire a new generation of leaders and activists on the continent. The great man-made river still flows, a testament to his vision. His story serves as a cautionary tale of a revolutionary leader who transformed his nation but was ultimately consumed by the very global powers he dared to defy.